by the end of this month. Now, the president is expected to give his final assent for disbursement any moment from now. If this sails through, that means this increase will be coming just 2 months to the June date that is being proposed for the removal of petrol subsidy.
Okay, this is one of the many gifts that this current government dispensation will be leaving for the next for the incoming government. And while obviously it ties into the fact what has been said in the story about the removal of subsidies, the entire idea from the government's point of view is to be able to cushion the effects of the subsidy removal, obviously, and that still remains to be seen what the impact will be on most Nigerians. Yes, because it's a double-edged sword. We need to cut our costs on subsidy, but looking at the impact on Nigerians today, that most of Nigerians don't only depend on fuel at its current rate just for driving their cars, like most of government officials try to push and say that it's just a part of the country, but it's just a segment of the population. But most of us depend on fuel, not just for the fueling of the cars, which everybody needs. Public transportation is also impacted. And also even our generating sets power, basically having power in our homes to be able to do businesses, to be able to keep our lights on, is largely dependent, at least for most of the Nigerian population, is largely dependent on having fuel or PMS, premium motor spirits in our homes. So the impact of subsidy removal, while most of us would agree that we need to get rid of it, the impact is going to be heavy on the Nigerian citizenry. And this is one of this government's approaches to try and ease it off. My only concern is that it seems that basically, while government is a continuum, this particular government is putting a lot of things in that nice handover envelope or handover notes that they want to hand over to the next government. And for me, it also doesn't give the incoming government the opportunity to be able to make its own decision on how to deal with these items without now having to either backtrack on what the current government has promised, or drawing foul of maybe labor unions and general citizenry. So it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to deliver this as a government. While we're giving increases while this is happening, and this is obviously happening at the federal level, we need to understand that the Nigerian civil service is larger than the federal level. We have also the various states. How will the various states react to this? Because typically the states have not reacted too well to salary increases. I know we know, for instance, that Lagos State had its own increase, I think, at the end of the elections, that was last month, which about delivering. So what I would expect, what I expect, which is what typically happens in Nigeria, is after this announcement comes through, the various states also, the various state unions and the various states also would want to see an increase also at various points. And typically the governors will try and push back, stating that, you know what, they have to separate the federal from the state and how those payments go out. So it's interesting to see how we're going to push this forward. Don't also forget that we're also dealing with shortfalls in our revenue earnings. Although obviously the proponents of subsidy removal says that once we get rid of subsidy removal, which is I believe in June, we are going to be able to save a lot more, and we should be able to push whatever we save into other things. And obviously the government is also doing its usual, which is trying to get loans to support its expenses. So for me, while it looks good on one side, we also need to balance out, what is going to happen on the other side. How will the various states react? How do we fund this increased expenditure? And how do we get ourselves out of the bigger mess, which is the increased inflation rates and other things that we're coping with as a country? So those are things that we need to ask ourselves long term.
All right, let's move on to daily trust. Now, the federal government has granted provisional approval for the R21 matrix malaria vaccine that's been developed by scientists at Oxford University.
Just amount a few days ago, Ghana actually did fairly providing information relating to their discrimination out of it. Like that back and what I think I did.
All right. Thank you.
What I need to see is what exactly are the plans towards ensuring that one, because we're looking at the vaccine, you know, being taken by children ages 5 months to 3 years for starting. What are the plans that we're going to put in place towards ensuring that all the side effects that it could cause, do we properly understand them? How do we react? And how do we make sure that we're proactive about them and ensure that all this? And this is one thing I think the Ministry of Health should clearly go out and what's it called, educate Nigerians. You don't want a situation whereby you take your child to the hospital 5 months after birth, and then you take the vaccine, and then something happens. Maybe he, or God forbid, the child dies, or he or she has some form of acute defect as a result of the vaccine. So they should publish the details of it, what it takes, what it entails, what are the things that need to be done when you take the vaccination, because you find out that you find out that you give children vaccination and they react to it. Sometimes, maybe because you don't understand in details, how the body will feel and how their bodies will react. So congratulations to Nigeria, congratulations to Ghana, and I do hope that this is going to start the gradual end of managing malaria across the continent.
Now, just coming off what you said, yeah, it does seem like the Ghanaians have a lot of detail. In fact, there's even a vaccine factory that is actually being planned. So that is solving a health challenge and also bringing economic opportunities to Ghana.
Yeah, and these are the things we expect from it. We can't continually call ourselves the giant of Africa, and every time we approve whether an implementation plan or something, and then we really don't know what the details are. Until something happens, someone fishes out the complete details to find out what the issues were, how did they deal with them, did they even deal with them? We had the issue, we had the 40% increase. What's the 40% increase on salary? Is it on the basic? Is it on the allowances? Is it on the consolidated salary scheme? And these are things that, we just throw these things in the air, which is what Nigeria is, headline news. And you throw the headlines and everybody starts to juxtapose or think about it in a particular way. And Labour, if you read that story in detail, Labour says, oh, the 40% must include the allowance. So what exactly, are you saying that it's 40% of basic salary? And it's the same thing with this is the health of Nigerians, first and foremost, and children for that matter. So you don't want to cause a chaos in Nigeria that everybody will tell you, the vaccine, the same way you said, we all went out, the COVID vaccines, they want to put some chips in everybody's life. And these are the realities where you have a people who are skeptical and don't trust the system. This is what you get.
Okay, let's go on to WhatsApp and look at some of the messages that we have coming through. You can also send yours in. It's 0809 440 981. Matthew says, good one from NAFDAC again. I hope there are plans to prevent the reoccurrence of the 1996 Pfizer incident. And Joseph says, it's obvious the government doesn't have economic think tanks at all. How is increasing salaries going to cushion the effects of subsidy removal? I think the bogus salaries and allowances of the states, House of Assemblies, ministers, and all who are in the system should be reduced. Okay, let's go on to the next headline. And this one is coming from, let's just scroll down to get that one in. It's coming from Vanguard. The federal government has appealed to the striking aviation workers to resume. Now, the federal government is saying the request for adjustment of the minimum wage would be implemented soon. Now, if you remember, the Nigerian aviation workers commenced the 2-day warning strike with a protest yesterday, and that left several air passengers stranded.
So down to the story, one of my challenges with strikes and how strikes are typically, come about in this society is our government and our management system, whoever is managing what, from the ministers downwards, are quite reactive when it comes to some of these things. And the labor unions, unfortunately, while a lot of people criticize labor unions for not being a bit creative with their approaches, one thing they have learned from experience is that last, as Nigerians say, the easiest way to get government's attention is actually to grind everything to a halt, both legally and illegally. So what we see is even apart from just downing troops and walking away, they basically stop all possible operations when it comes to particular things. And it's, in this particular instance, a bit more worrisome for me because your airports, your aviation sector is also, apart from being a revenue earner, apart from being a service that needs to continue, it's also an essential service in most cases, also a security service. You don't just go and take over the airports or stop at transactions at the airports or say, hey, nobody can fly in and out. But that's what tends to happen with other things that in this instance and every other thing we do. And yes, like I said, we can criticize labor unions, but you can also look at their side and say, hey, what other ways can they get any Nigerian government's attention? That's what we've been saying for many years. Hopefully at some point, I would hope that unions become a bit more creative and actually do a lot more engaging to government, but two have to play that game together. So what we've seen is that obviously they've gone on their warning strike yesterday. Sorry to everybody who tried to travel or tried to use the airports yesterday. I heard it was a mess and passengers were stranded. And what's happening here is that the Minister for Aviation is telling them, hey, that, you know what, that you don't need to continue on this strike because of, and that's pointing back to our first story, we are going to increase salaries for everybody. So, wait for that and see how that pans out before you go and start disrupting everything. And this speaks to how you also communicate to people within the sector, because I would assume that if the guys in the aviation sector knew that there was going to be a salary increase and were aware of that and had been engaged proactively, they would probably have waited to see how that panned out before embarking on the steps. Because at the end of the day, they are basically asking for the same thing. Their wages and their current salaries and wages are not commensurate with what's happening in the country. We have between 2.4 or an increased inflation rate, which is the official inflation rate. Because if you ask other Nigerians on the streets and using the shops, probably tell you that the inflation rate is far much higher than what the MBS is stating. So everybody's feeling the pinch. And yes, like we said, this year is going to be a long and interesting year, and how most of Nigerians pan out. But we are hoping that the guys would sheathe their sword, be a bit more patient, and take a step back and see how this pans out. But for me also, if I was talking to them, I would say keep engaging. Ensure that you're not just, because basically this government has a terminal date. Their terminal date is on May 29, they're handing over, they're moving on. They can promise as much as they want to promise now, and they know that they will not be held to deliver any of those things after this period. So they need to keep engaging. They need also start engaging whoever is incoming. Unfortunately, we still have the clouds of the election processes and the court process hanging over that. But some things need to happen. We can't grind to a halt because of these things happening. So yeah, good luck to them. I'm hoping that the unions take a step back and allow normal activities to continue at the airports, at least until they get to this point where they sort it out. So let's see how this goes.
All right, Imo from Ikeja says, I don't think labor unions should be creative. I think our leaders should take responsibility and ensure that the union won't have any reason to be creative in the first place. Dami says, 2 questions. 1, how many people are going to benefit from the salary increase for the federal civil service compared to the entire population of the country? And 2, can a government that couldn't implement a transition to a cashless economy manage probably the biggest economic dislocation and realignment in the history of the country?
Maybe the incoming government will be able to do that.
And Yemi from Marina says, further information on vaccines must be made available. We're in a generation where data is very important. Are there people with certain conditions who should not take the vaccine? Who produced the vaccines? Not who, hopefully. We need more details, please. God bless Nigeria. Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue the conversation. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Nigeria.
Which number next?
Okay, I think we can do 6. Why does who gets such a bad rep?
Because they believe it's just they took too much money from the world for malaria.
But yeah, then we can go to the power one. Or should we do the power one first?
Who's in power?
You.
No, you didn't power.
I love you, Uade.
Well, let's do 6 because the federal government they seem to just be doling out money left, right, and center.
Everything is about them doing that. This terminal time. You know what happens when you are giving out contracts?
Dog.
When they're about to leave.
Collect the money and
everybody else
everybody collect just collect the money.
Everybody's looking at their account and say, how much can I take before I leave?
Yes.
You know, it's just crazy. It's crazy. You've been there for years, not doing much. Then
Chibuzor, we're going on in 5 seconds.
I'm here.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines across the nation this morning. My analysts, Chibuzor and Uade, are in, and we love you to let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number again is 0809 440 981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. We're going on to the Daily Trust. The federal government has approved release of 45.3 billion naira as reimbursements to states and the FCT for the implementation of the Nigeria COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program, the NG Cares.
Okay. In the last couple of weeks, every time I'm sure when they meet again this week tomorrow, they would tell us that they are spending more money. All we read in newspapers today is how much money that they're giving out. But I do hope that if they're refunding or reimbursing states who, in my own opinion, this is my opinion, did not meet the expectations of the Nigerians in managing the welfare issues and the welfare, for COVID, then I don't understand why we're giving them 45 billion at the end of this government's, this administration's term. This administration would bar out in less than 50 days. Thereabout. Today is what? 18 plus 12 plus 29, 51, 41 days. Right. And all we see in the last 1 month, in the last 2 weeks, is approval for fixing Third Mainland Bridge, 6 billion, approval to reimburse states, 45 billion, approval to put internet across Nigerians airports, 24 billion. We're just hearing the billions and billions and billions. What will the next administration that is coming in do? When you have given out all the money at the end of this term, they are going to start looking for money. We're already hearing that, we need to increase VAT from 7.5 to 10%, which is most likely going to happen. You've taken a loan on behalf of Nigerians. I don't know whether it's a loan or a grant. And we are saying that we're going to increase the salaries of Nigerians. We don't even know whether it's the basic or the total allowance. And like someone pointed out, how many people work in the federal civil service in comparison to I don't know, maybe 200 million Nigerians who are going to bear the brunt of the subsidy removal? What exactly are they doing? This is an administration over the last 1 year that has cried, there's no money for this. We talked about the aviation sector. They were on strike last year for almost a month. Are you with me? And we still haven't gotten to the end of it. But you're quick to dole out monies to states to reimburse them for NG cares. And I don't know how they cared for Nigerians during COVID, which, because the average Nigerian at the end of the day had to make do with what he had. We saw videos, not just in Lagos, across Nigeria, of Nigerians. What was it that they called it? Palliatives that we didn't see. And we're hearing again about this $800 million palliatives that they want to give to 50 million Nigerians. They're just spending money that we don't have. You've left Nigeria with a dead body that maybe it's my children's children that is probably going to start paying. And when I hear these things and I look at them, I'm just amazed at why a lame duck administration believes that it's at the end of his administration that, in quote, for the cameras, you seem to be doing so much. Well, congratulations to the states. Zamfara, 5 billion, Ondo State, 3 billion, more money to your coffers. I don't know whether they are going to print the Naira now and give it to them. And I don't know which Naira they are printing. Is it the new one or the old one? So let's see how it goes.
So
Okay.
I like to keep it a bit.
Yes.
So what two things that caught me in this story, which I find very interesting. So the part where they based these results on rigorous result verification exercise by an independent consultant. It's very interesting. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but yeah, we know what we're talking about. And it's also a milestone effort in reducing poverty in the country. Like what they said, we were all in Nigeria during the COVID period, and we saw what happened after with the party, where we were found most of these materials that had been given out or were supposed to have been distributed to the people who have been stockpiled and being looted by people because they did not disperse them during the COVID era. Now we are coming to say, hey, we are going to give the same states who had these disbursements basically a thank you gift for doing the work that they were supposed to do that we found out they did not do.
No, for doing the work that they did not do.
Exactly.
We're telling them thank you for doing the work that they did not do.
Not doing the work. Thank you for not doing the work. And it's just, like you said, it's just one of the things about Nigeria. We just keep smiling.
But you know that it's hard work not doing the work.
Well, it's hard work not doing the work.
It's even harder to not do the work.
And creating the impression that you're doing the work. So
exactly, it's harder.
It's what it is. It's what it is.
Okay. All right, let's go on to Vanguard. The NBS says Nigeria's headline inflation rate increased to 22.04% on a year-on-year basis in March 2023. And this is according to the NBS's Consumer Price Index and Inflation Report for March, which was released just yesterday in Abuja.
So results are out. At least the official results are out. CPI and the inflation reports have come out. We are 0.13% higher, and that's not positive than what we were in February. So we've gone to where are we now? 22.04. Year on year, we've also jumped by 6.13. So while I had this discussion with a former colleague some months back about inflation and how inflation was growing and in Nigeria. And one of the things he reminded me about was that it's not just Nigeria, it's a global problem, which I agree it is. But yeah, while I can look far and wide and say, hey, inflation is growing everywhere in the world, I want to look back at where I'm sitting and say, understand, what's the impact on it for me. So one of the challenges, obviously, we have is, and yes, thanks to the MBS for doing the work they've done, and the economists and the guys interested in statistics can go and look at the methodology and how this was done. But we have the numbers now that have come out and are official, and obviously, for a lot of Nigerians, they will say, hey, these numbers are pretty low to what they expect, because when they walk into the shops and they buy stuff that they were buying months back, for them, the rates are far higher than this. When you're trying to rent a house, for instance, accommodation is, it has moved up. And Nigerians are very interesting when we react to some of these things. So typically for governments and businesses and enterprises, when you have this kind of information coming out, there's a way that you're expected to react. You have to look at how do we either cushion the effects on our people, or how do we drop these numbers. One of the challenges I've had with this government is what appears a lot of times to be non-alignment between our monetary and our fiscal policies, because I'm sure that next time the CBN has their their regular meetings, they're going to come and try and fix the numbers to try and counter inflation, the inflationary forces. But from my own point of view, I'm not seeing enough coming from the Ministry of Finance to see how are we going from the fiscal policy side? How do we deal with this problem? What we are hearing from the government, obviously, is various, like most of the stories I've talked about today, is outlays of cash. Want to sort this by doing this. We are thinking subsidy now. We're talking about we're talking inflation now. We're thinking subsidy for next few months, in the next few months, which also have its attendant effect. So this year, for instance, is going to be challenging. Whichever government is going to come in on May 29, the incoming government has been declared the winners. Whatever they're going to do at all levels are going to have that challenge of dealing with this inflation, because I do not see it. I'm not trying to sound negative, but I don't see it sliding back, because, yeah, like you said, this government in its terminal days, they're not really focused on doing much and anything apart from just tidying up the papers, getting things done and putting those files together. What this government we need to attend to is, apart from what is happening now, is looking back in the net, by the time you remove subsidy, I expect those numbers to still climb. If they try to do anything with the exchange rate also, I expect those numbers to climb. So how do we react as a country? So it's a very interesting scenario. Towards the end of last year, we were trying to see how we manage the numbers a bit well. We were rejoicing in January, saying that, hey, we had a slight drop that was against December. But obviously, we've seen things within our currency swap, everything has
cash swap.
Yeah, the cash swap, because cash swap had some impact because a lot of prices were pushed up to basically accommodate the payments, because there are additional charges on payments that need to be made. So in looking at that also, it tells you how the little things that are happening in various sectors and driven by various players within this government and governments have an impact on these headline numbers, and how the government in its entirety needs to work together to cushion it and push it down if they want to. So we'll hold our breath, and Nigerians just keep working hard and keeping alive. It's going to be interesting times ahead.
I like that word, work hard.
All right. AGK says the government has performed below expectations and should try to be proactive instead of reactive. I'm yet to see a true criteria for disbursing the palliative to cushion the fuel subsidy removal, having at the back of my mind the lockdown experience. And let's see, Idima Puza, today is Tuesday. So you're responding to yesterday's topic and you've responded 5 times. Okay, thank you. And let's go. Dami from Ikeja says, can we go to court and challenge the inflation figures for the NDS? You are so shady, Dami. We've got about a minute, but we have to try to get to this really quickly. From Punch, Natarawa residents protest outrageous electricity bills and they're seeking the government's intervention.
Apologies for this. Everybody in Nigeria, every citizen of Nigeria is seeking government intervention in everything. Private sector, public sector, no sector, all sectors. But we've seen a government and an administration that really has done nothing. Chibuzor just explained that you're not even looking at the monetary against the fiscal, and we're just borrowing and spending on recurrent expenditure. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten there in the last 8 years in terms of power. There were so many expectations in terms of this, and I feel for the consumers, if prices are continually going up and I'm not getting the power, so why am I paying? But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Abuja Electricity Distribution should try as much as possible to sit down with their customers, let them better understand what the challenges are and how they're going to try and sort it out. And at the end of the day, let's get more gas into the generation companies. Let's improve on our transmission, which we know this government promised us so much, and we still haven't gotten past the 5,000 megawatts. Correct me, Chibuzor, of transmission in the last 8 years, despite all the monies that have been put into it, despite the agreement with Siemens. They tell us that Siemens have brought 3 massive transformers that we haven't seen the effect on it in the last 1 year. And this Siemens deal started in 2019, just before COVID. It's been signed, nothing has been done. The only thing that has been done about it is the training of, in quote, Nigerians who are going to implement the project. It's just by and large, it's 8 years of, I don't want to call it waste, 8 years of Nigerians learning better on the mistakes that we make.
Well, I'm going to take one quick message from Fabian. He says, in spite of the debts that we are in, the government wants to increase federal civil service salaries when they know that the private sector is cutting salaries as well as workers. What do they hope to achieve by the salary increase? More inflation? So many white elephant projects they're bringing up at the last hour. I hope this spending will be probed when the new government enters. And that's all the time that we have this morning for Freshly Pressed. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your messages. And thanks to our analysts as well, Chibuzor and Uade, for joining us this morning.